As you may know, my husband and I are parents of 6 children. At the peak time that we had our children in our home, we had 5 children at max in the home, plus 2 parents and occasionally a grandmother. Now, this not only made for a lot of people, this made for a lot of stuff. And a lot of identical stuff. And a lot of squabbles over stuff. Whose headphones are these? Whose charger is this? Who drank out of this bottle of pop? Who had this chapstick? Very soon in my parenting, I learned that a Sharpie marker was going to be my best friend as we put names on everything. Names on the Playland cups of drinks for when you ran away and came back and said, which one is mine? Names on the toys, and yes, even initials on the bottom of the chapstick that come in your Christmas stocking. Yes, we had to label everything. And if you notice, I was prepared for this because none of my children's names start with the same initial. It was a plan. Now, Jesus has a question of ownership before him this day. The question in today's reading is short to the point. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? And Jesus won't be drawn into the fray about taxes. He says, whose name is on it? With that statement, the argument ends. Okay, maybe it wasn't quite that easy, but this was still the premise of the Lord's statement. Who owns what? This tax was a yearly census tax, a per-person tax of 1 denarius. 1 denarius is what you would make working a full day if you were a laborer. The establishment of this tax had provoked revolt in the Jews in the area of Galilee in 6 AD. So not all that long before, 25 years before this passage was written. The Jews had such upheaval at the time of Jesus related to some of this. And then after the time of Jesus, around 70 AD, there was more revolt and the temple was destroyed. All based on this push and pull between Rome and the Jews in the area. So the topic of imperial tax is very divisive. Now I want to make it clear that it wasn't that they didn't pay taxes. They paid plenty of taxes. Temple tax, land tax, custom tax. But this imperial tax is a tribute to Rome to support Roman occupation. I want you to hear this clearly. They are working a full day's labor to pay the Romans money to be able to oppress them and rule over them. This is why they're so upset in this moment. The general crowd would have found this tax to be an offensive reminder of their humiliation. So, they gathered together. Different groups of people to talk to Jesus. The Herodians hoped that Jesus would oppose paying the tax to Caesar so that they could go off to the Roman leaders and accuse him of treason against Rome, a crucifying offense. The Pharisees hoped that Jesus would support paying taxes to Caesar so that the Jewish people could view him as a Roman sympathizer. Just about the only thing that the Pharisees and the Herodians had in common was that they didn't like Jesus. These groups with opposing views on all kinds of policy did agree on their opposition of the young rabbi, Jesus, who came into Jerusalem just a couple days before on a donkey to the shouts of Hosanna. And he had been causing quite a stir in the temple ever since. This was the last week of Jesus' natural life, and he was set up for an argument to tear down Jesus, not an answer to taxes. So Jesus asks for a denarius. Let me see the money. Let me see it. So as I was writing this, I thought, well, this is not a denarius, but it's $1. Let me look at this. Maybe, Jesus, you're going to speak to me. Because I remember going through the Washington, D.C. currency mint tour and seeing these big trays of dollars being printed on both sides. I know that it's paper and ink, but what might it say to me? Well, on this side it says, "This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private." It says Federal Reserve, it says United States of America. But what about this on the other side? "In God we trust." Well, render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and unto God what is God's. And if we're looking at money, on one side it says the U.S., and on the other side it says God. And this, I don't know that this would speak to me in the same way that it spoke to the Romans. I'm not sure this is as powerful as the money in the Romans' time. See, U.S. currency, if you remember my first degree in finance, I loved studying about money, I've got to tell you. And U.S. currency used to be backed by actual gold, like go to Fort Knox, get a piece of gold. Do you know what it's backed by now? The full faith and credit of the United States government. Sit with that for a minute. I would like to stake my future on something a little more secure, hence I am a preacher. The makings of the denarius, though, were not nearly as ambiguous as American money, and also significantly more offensive. Significantly more offensive because the denarius, which Jesus called his questioners to produce, read, "Tiberius Caesar, august son of the divine Augustus," on one side, and Pontifex Maximus, which is the high priest, on the other. So this coin declared that Caesar was both king and all but God. On this money. The money in itself was offensive. The Jews were opposed to having this coin, let alone paying a tax to Rome with it, but only Roman money could be used to pay Roman debt. So they had to have these coins that were graven idols, these coins that declared a different God. By pointing out that his opponents, these Jewish leaders, even had these coins on their person, was Jesus taking a little bit of a knock at their own loyalty to God. Because Jews shouldn't have these, especially where they are on the Temple Mount. Give to Caesar what is Caesar, and God what is God's. See, they would have used temple coins. Remember that story of the money changer, which actually happened the day before, where he tipped over the money changers' tables in the temple grounds? Did you ever wonder why money was being changed? It was because you were carrying a Roman coin, and it was so unholy that you couldn't take it onto the temple grounds. You had to go trade it for a temple coin, one that didn't have graven images or worship another god. That's why there were money changers there. And Jesus had already had it out with the money changers. Now he's having it out with the Pharisees who are carrying this money that is, in fact, breaking commandments. So, Jesus says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Give to God what is God's. The emperor may be able to imprint his face and title on things because it's a coin stamped out for human purposes, with an image of Caesar. The first part of Jesus' answer indicates that taxes should be paid, since the emperor's image and inscription on the coin would cause it to fall under things that are the emperor's. But the emperor is only due what belongs to him. Not everything belongs to the emperor, contrary to the belief of the emperor. In this, Jesus is limiting that which is due to the emperor to only that which is the emperor's. Jesus answered in a way that places people in the position of having to balance their responsibilities as citizens of both an earthly realm and a spiritual realm. Give the emperor his due, but no more. Give the emperor the things that bear his image. But an unspoken question is hanging in the air. You, my friend, whose image do you bear? Jesus acknowledges that being a servant of God does not exempt you from being a tax-paying servant of the state, but Jesus emphasizes that there is a higher allegiance to God. If it has the emperor's name on it, fine, give it to the emperor, but if it has God's name on it, give it to God. The broader duty to God does not erase the duty to emperor, but it does change it, because we are not to mess around with things that belong to God. And Jesus affirms the all-encompassing reach of God. It's not that some things belong to the emperor and some things belong to God. No, this isn't a division. It is that some things can be given to the emperor, but everything belongs to God. What has God's name on it, after all? Everything. Read the Psalms. Nature declares the glory of the Lord. Read that you were created fearfully and wonderfully made. Read that everything was made by God. Therefore, what do we owe to God? Everything. See, with the tax, we know exactly how much belongs to the emperor, and the remainder, well, the remainder is ours. But it's not the same when it comes to God. We are not to compartmentalize our loyalties. We do not have permission ever to live hypocritical lives. No. See, it isn't that we get to compartmentalize and say that Monday through Saturday we give to Caesar and we give to God on Sunday. No, by no means, because we belong to God. Sometimes it seems that we belong to the leaders of our country. Taxes, legal restrictions on our freedoms, imprisonment if we break laws. Or perhaps we feel that our job owns us, or our families, or sometimes we even feel owned by our material possessions. I have known more than one small business owner that didn't feel that they owned their business, but their business owned them. Yet, to whom do we really belong? Take a look at any person and whose inscription is on him or her. Listen to the words of Genesis 1. And God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness. In whose image were we made? In whose name was poured upon you at your baptism? You bear God's image. You were created in the image of God. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, you were baptized. You, all that you are, is God's. God's name is on you because you belong to God. God's image is deep within you. The coins and currency of our country bear the image of dead presidents, but each of us bears a different image. God claims us with the imprint of God's image and likeness. We bear God's image and therefore we behave like such. Through our baptismal covenant, we say that we will honor God through our prayers, our presence, our gifts, our service, and our witness. That's how we show the image of God upon us. God is owed but bears God's image and name, our very lives. Bearing that image is humbling and sometimes an overwhelming responsibility that God trusts to us. But we must never forget to give unto God the things that are God's. We give ourselves to God because it is to God that we belong. We belong to God in all of our being, with all of our talents, all of our interests, all of our time, and all of our wealth. We give to God that which belongs to God. Whatever we go forth and give in taxes or to the retirement fund or to the offering basket at church, we can never afford to forget this. We belong entirely to God. And though we may divide our budgets, we must never divide our allegiance. Caesar can stamp his image far and wide, but he cannot own what God does. In our flesh and our blood is stamped the image of God. Your life is marked with the image of one who is eternal. Sometimes the image of God is hard to recognize when life is hard and has tried to write over us. But it is there. The light in your eyes, the child you were, the person you are, the person you will someday be. There somewhere is the image of a watery sign of a cross made once upon you, on your forehead. And God sees it, God sees it still. There you find the image of God marked upon you. Jesus is calling us to remember to whom we belong and to give our entire lives to God, all that we are and all that we have. And this goes much deeper than coins in our pockets. We are God's. Each and every one created in the image of the divine. Wherever we give and whenever we give, we are to do so in the understanding that we belong to God. Therefore, what we give back to belongs to God. We take what is God's and give and invest and pour out in lives that pour out in worship. Sometimes that worship occurs privately in devotion, sometimes in church with our brothers and sisters in Christ, and the rest of the time it occurs in daily work and service. Sometimes we are deeply inspired by how that occurs. May I take a moment as I end this to tell you of someone who deeply inspired me. I have been deeply inspired by Gail Cole since I started attending the Lansing Church. Gail Cole has been part of the community in Burt Lake for 25, 30 years, and she has attended many of those at the Lansing Church. When we merged, she has been over here, I think, twice between her health concerns, and I believe the last time was late June, early July, right in there. She was here. The last time she came, she walked right up those steps and sat over there and worshiped. Gail inspires me. I remember not a ton about that last Sunday service we did at Lansing because it was so hard. Those of you that were there know it. But I do remember Gail walking up to me afterward and saying, "Pastor, you didn't take prayers today. It's the only time you didn't take prayers from the congregation." And I told her the truth. I didn't have the emotional strength to do it. And she looked me in the eyes and she said, "Here is what I wanted to tell you." She said, "When you first came to this church, Pastor, I wouldn't have paid a nickel for you." She said, "But I'll tell you this now, you are priceless. And I pray that every time you preach, you wear pockets. Because I pray that God fills them with blessings to overflowing, that you carry blessings in your pockets, enough to give away and enough to keep you warm." On Monday, Gail entered the rest of her term, Father. And I don't know what's going to happen. Her service will be in the spring, so I don't know with family downstate if I'm going to be a part of that or not. But because of Gail, I remember that day. And I want you, if you have not heard this one paragraph, this obituary she wrote as a final love letter, I want you to hear it, because this is a life lived in the image of God. She writes, "It is with both a heavy heart and a blessed relief that I must say goodbye to you all, my cherished friends and family. It is time for me to join Doug and Bill and Lou and all the others that have gone before. Something that I have been looking forward to for some time. Thank you all for your caring, sharing companionship during my journey here. I await renewing acquaintances when we next see one another with great anticipation. Each one of you are so special to me, and I shall miss our visits greatly. I will cherish and keep these memories to warm my heart on my new adventure. And if I can find a post office and a Hallmark store here, I will continue to send cards. Email may be a bit more problematic because my faithful little iPod could not make the trip. Be kind to yourselves and each other until we meet again. Hugs and loving, Gail." Her final love letter. Because she didn't need to tell about her life. Her life was the image of God. She shared that community and that connection. And I was prepared to preach that and to say it. And I about lost breath when I walked into my office just now, right before this service. I wasn't here on Thursday because it was my husband's birthday, and so someone else got the mail for me. And I opened a card, with handwriting I didn't recognize on the outside. But on the inside, Gail, who had passed away on Monday, sent a card here that arrived on Thursday. She writes, "Blessed are the givers, and grateful are the receivers. Thank you so much, Gail." The image of God. One who gives unto the end. One who gives back by encouragement every step of the way. This is someone who understands that all that I am and all that I have belongs to the Lord. Someone who gives. Because ultimately, church, giving ourselves to God means that we give ourselves to the world. All our lives. Maybe a little longer. May you give to God what is God's. May you remember that that is everything. Amen.